Hello, this is Christopher Chesterman with Liberty University. Today I'm going to talk to you about the history of Twin Cedars Youth and Family Services Incorporated, a nonprofit social services organization headquartered in LaGrange, Georgia that specializes in overall family well-being. Twin Cedars operates multiple facilities throughout Georgia and Alabama. And although the organization itself is fairly young, about 25 years old, the facilities it operates have histories deeply rooted in education and community engagement. Take, for example, its earliest facility located in LaGrange, Georgia, the Bradfield campus. This started in 1866 as a freedmen's school sponsored by Warren Temple United Methodist Church. It was started as LaGrange Academy, then became LaGrange Seminary, followed by the John King School. Then when the LaGrange City incorporated its public school system, the site became East Depot High School, which serviced an all-black population due to segregation. Following the Brown v. Board of Education ruling and the subsequent integration of the LaGrange City Public Schools, the site became known as Eastside Primary School and Eastside Boys Junior High School, a combined facility until its decommission in 1990 and partial demolition in 1993. What does this have to do with Twin Cedars, you might be asking? To answer that question, we have to go all the way back to the late 1970s. During this time, there were increased reports of issues with juvenile delinquency, along with problems with incarcerating juveniles with adult criminal populations. It is for this reason that the Executive Committee of the Troup County Juvenile Court Advisory Board was formed to investigate and combat these issues. The chairman, Mrs. Bradfield, was even able to meet with Governor Busby, who was the Georgia governor at the time, and he commended her efforts in Troup County and offered his full support for all that she was doing. So this community involvement, legislative involvement, allowed the committee to generate programs to help out at-risk youth. There are emergency and urgent care facilities that young people could go to. Out of this committee, the West Georgia Youth Council was formed. Some newspapers dated to 77, others to 79. So definitely by 1980, the West Georgia Youth Council was operating the programs advocated by the Juvenile Court Advisory Board. And so in 1981, they got a boys group home and then in 1983, they got a girls group home. So throughout the 1980s, there's increased awareness of juvenile delinquency and at-risk youth issues. In 1990, the Juvenile Court Advisory Board was decommissioned for the West Georgia Youth Council to take its place. This was more of a formality as both of them have been working in tandem throughout the 1980s. Then in mid-1990, the West Georgia Youth Council was forced to relocate. Their administration was operating out of rented buildings from the city government and the Board of Education, and their group homes were out of rented homes. They were renting the homes for the children to live in. So they needed to consolidate their facilities. It was necessary, but they were in a time crunch, basically. So at first they were going to use the Dunson School, another decommissioned school, but the nearby residents voted it down. They did not want it, they wouldn't take it, and they got it disapproved. And so the next site was the East Side School site, which was investigated, approved, and the West Georgia Youth Council relocated its efforts to that site in 1992, which is now the Bradfield campus. It was around the same time that the West Georgia Youth Council merged with the Anna Elizabeth Shepherd Home to become Twin Cedars Youth and Family Services. Now, the Anna Elizabeth Shepherd Home started in 1845 as an asylum for orphaned and destitute girls. It was created by the Ladies Educational and Benevolent Society of the Methodist Episcopal Church of Columbus, Georgia. A little bit later, in the 1850s, the organization, they dropped the Methodist Episcopal Church and just kept Columbus, Georgia, so they could include all denominations. But their goal was to educate young girls into becoming functional members of society. In the 1800s, expectations were much different back then. So their focus was on domestic work, domestic skills, sewing, taking care of children, things like that. They were still given a formal education as far as reading and writing to be literate and understand what was going on. But a lot of their work also involved house cleaning and generally what was considered women's work at the time. The board heading the asylum was very, very active, almost micromanagingly so. They did hire a matron to do the day-to-day operations at the home, to care for the girls, looked after them, provide for them. But there was a board member assigned every month to be a manager of the home to make sure things were going well. Sometimes the home hired in-house teaching as well. There were times I went to public school, times I were tutored privately, sometimes a combination of the two, depending on the situation. But also, the board discouraged the arts. One matron constantly requested music lessons for herself, which was declined. Also, the board, even in the 1880s, declined to purchase piano for the girls to use at the home. In addition, in 1873, there was a vote to get a new sewing machine, which was deferred, and none of the records mention a sewing machine until they buy one in 1881. So they didn't even want the girls to have a sewing machine to make sure that they could be on point with their domestic work. However, they also looked after the girls and getting them employment. There are a lot of people in the community and surrounding area that needed help with young children or sick family members and so forth. And so they would write to the asylum, and the board would approve or recommend certain girls to go provide these services for pay. The girls would get paid for it for themselves. So the whole idea was to educate them in how to operate in the real world, how to function in society. And over the years, it gained a reputation and kept moving forward. In the 1900s, the girls went to public education as well. And in 1924, Colonel W.S. Shepherd bequeathed a family home to the society to be specifically used as a home for orphan girls. And so this worked for the next 40 years, and the home kept doing well. It was up and down. There was a fire in 1854. They had to relocate. Civil War dispersed the children in the 1860s. There are all kinds of diseases, scarlet fever, the Spanish flu, other unnamed general fever or sickness going around. There are a lot of things happening, but the home stayed open all the way up into the 1960s. And there were times they had to borrow money. Other times they were doing extremely well. It just depended on the time. You know, when you're around for 150 years, stuff is going to happen. But in the 1960s, there's pressure on the home to house boys as well. But Colonel Shepherd bequeathed it in his will that it was only girls. So the home that they used could not house boys at all. And it became the Anna Elizabeth Shepherd home at that point, named after his mother. And so the idea was to move the home to another location, which is where it is today, but to move it so they could have facilities to house boys as well as house girls, which is what it does today. And then in the 1990s, the Anna Elizabeth Shepherd home experienced some more financial difficulties. They could not gain the support they needed. They were running out of money from all the wills and other stuff that had been donated. They were down. They were going to have to shut down very quickly if they did not get the money they needed. So that prompted the merger with the West Georgia Youth Council, because the Youth Council was looking to expand its services to offer its support to other programs. So it was a perfect storm to allow the merger for both of these goals to occur. And so the West Georgia Youth Council acquired the Anna Elizabeth Shepherd home for $1. It was a bill of sale so it could acquire it. But the infrastructure remained largely the same in the Anna Elizabeth Shepherd home. Twin Cedars would offer its support services for at-risk youth therapy and so forth. And most importantly, being under the organization, Anna Elizabeth Shepherd home would get a lot more money even from the government to help these children in foster care or in the system or what have you. So it was a good deal all around. And after the deal was acquired, it was realized that a lot of work needed to be done on both the Anna Elizabeth Shepherd home and the Bradfield campus with the Eastside School. And so that is where the renovations come in. A capital campaign was started in 1995 to raise money. And it was a slow start, but under former executive director Mike Ainsat, they were able to get the ball rolling and get the money in, mainly through large grants and donations of wealthy individuals to get it going. And here's what he has to say about some of that work.
I arrived here in 1995. Part of the former East Depot High School and the Boys Junior High was demolished, and the courtyard in between the administrative cottage and the Hudson cottage was a shambles of brick and asbestos, and it was a mess. There was a lot of asbestos that needed to be removed so it would be safe for the boys and the staff to live here. So there were times when folks in full asbestos removal gear, looking like spacemen, needed to get inside the buildings to abate it and ensure that there were no hazards.
Yeah.
Okay, this was a locker room, and it was, golly, you could tell that it had been used in a way that it wasn't intended. Well, what was needed, we needed a facility that would meet standards to be approved by Department of Education and eventually become SACS or Ed First accredited. So we needed to remodel the former locker room into classrooms, and we needed to hire teachers, and we needed to be able to clear the debris out of the courtyard, and we needed to put together a robust education program with certified, highly qualified teachers. It was a mess. So everybody was in favor of it being revitalized. Yeah, I remember a lot of the staff jokingly called me Mr. Turnaround because I was willing to take some chances to turn things around, because the renovation and the money to become fully accredited didn't come cheap. It's kind of like flying an airplane while you're building it. You know, it was we opened and we started, and construction was going at the same time.
During the renovation time, former director Engstad also got the Bradfield Campus School accredited through the education system, through the Troup County education system. The LaGrange City School and Troup County, or LaGrange City, became part of Troup County school systems in 1993. And so they had to get accredited in order for transcripts to transfer out when they left the program at the Bradfield campus. And this was also achieved in the late 1990s. So there was a lot going on. And if that wasn't enough, the Twin Cedars also acquired a management contract for Camp Viola. This was a camp created by Viola Burke, who wanted to treat underprivileged children to tours of nature. And she couldn't find a spot suitable, so she bought some land and used it for that purpose. And so it was a very close vote, 4-3, for the community members involved in the vote of allowing Twin Cedars to manage the property. But they were allowed to do so, and that contract is still intact up to this day, where they manage the camp for 4-H, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, church retreats. All kinds of people can use it, but they operate the management. Now, shortly after all this, the renovation, the Camp Viola, all that stuff, Twin Cedars actually got to be part of the Jimmy Carter Works program to create the Magnolia campus, a home for teen mothers or teen pregnancy, just to help them get back on their feet because of the situation they were in. And it was founded, it was called the Magnolias, named after the original name of the estate that the owner of the land used the original name for the area. That's what it was called. In summary, Twin Cedars was founded on a conglomeration of education and activism, and it continues its legacy of the facility histories by providing services to at-risk youth, their families, and engaging with the community as a whole. And this is just the beginning. Thank you.